Hey guys, I just want to have a quick chat to you about why it is important before we get into the practice sacks to start generating some seeds or planting some seeds that can be used to germinate our ideas while we are actually practicing our responses to our sacks, and of course when we get a chance to do the final sack. I've deliberately downloaded from the study design an outline of the key knowledge and skills that you are required to demonstrate. The reason for that is because I want you to know that when I tell you are going to be assessed on something, I'm not making it up. VCAR have specifically said that first things first, I need you to be able to understand the ideas related to personal identity, the viewpoints and arguments and assumptions made by the authors of the text, okay, and the objections. Now, I can quite easily say that I've covered them in all the videos that you've watched, and watching you guys take your notes, you've definitely written them down, and you have definitely recorded an accurate understanding of all that stuff. But the thing is, though, when have we really done a lot of work on the similarities and differences between different philosophers, their viewpoints, concepts, etc., right? When have I ever got you to look at, how different philosophers would reply to one philosopher's thought experiment and the implications of a particular philosophical theory, that kind of stuff? I'm actually required to assess you on that. I'm required to make sure that you do that and practice that. And that's why I give you 3 practice sacks, to give you the practice and give you the immediate feedback to really build that higher order of thinking, okay? Now also too, the idea of doing the exam-like questions is designed to kind of get you into the higher order of thinking. Most of you have demonstrated the ability to understand something, but when it comes to performing critical evaluations between philosophers through comparisons, or by trying to find your own philosopher or your own kind of philosophical thought and then justify it with reference to different aspects of different philosophies, that's been an area where there's been a little bit of weakness in the past. So that's what we need to work on, okay? I mean, you can just read through it here, justify critical responses, your own critical responses and viewpoints using clear and precise language. You can only do that if you really understand the language of other philosophers, explore the implications of thought experiments. Okay, you could do that. You can, what else? Worldly knowledge. I keep saying worldly knowledge is really important. Look at different scientific advancements and scientific developments happening already. These are things that need to be done. But one of the most important things is that you need to be able to show that you critically compare viewpoints and arguments in the set text by comparing the plausibility of the premises or viewpoints, the strengths of the assumptions made, the reasons used, and the potential consequences of debates concerning personal identity. In other words, to make that really simple, you need to be able to explore the logic of each particular philosopher, outline some areas where you think that they are strong or they are flawed, compare them with each other, say overall I believe this position is the best, or I believe in a hybrid of them, and bang, put them forward, right? And that's why I'm saying that what you really need to do is to go to page 186 and page 187 of your textbook and start germinating or start planting the seeds of those kind of ideas, the ideas that deal with the higher order aspects of what you're being assessed on. Again, I'll say it again, I think that most of you are okay with showing that you understand the philosophical concepts, the conclusions, the thought experiments, and possible objections. It's just getting to the part where you justify in depth your own philosophical position through critical comparisons between different philosophers and show that you can evaluate them for their logical plausibility. That's where things get a little bit weak and you need practice doing that. So how do we do that? Well, do these questions, right? To really think about these areas. And I'll show you what I usually get versus what I actually want when I'm replying to a table like this, just to point out that some people think that what's up here is enough and it's nowhere near it, okay? Alright, so the first table that I want you to do, from page 186 of your textbook, is basically to pick 4 different thought experiments. Now, what you need to understand too is that these thought experiments come from Locke, Hume, or Michaels, okay? And I want you to basically go through and fill out the table. And I thought, well, if I modelled every single response, that would be very boring and a little patronising. Also, too, science is saying, if I talk to you too much, you're probably only going to remember the first 7 minutes of it anyway, right? So the science also says that I need to model to you before I expect you to do something. So what I did was I thought I'd actually just model my reply to the one thought experiment on the first two criteria of the table, okay? Now, what do I usually get? Well, if I asked you to outline the thought of the experiment and its implications, it would be very, very, very common for people to be lazy and just go, memories transferred from Prince to Cobbler's body. Now, when it comes to an exam environment or when it comes to a SAC environment, that is not going to help you at all. You haven't laid down the hard work, all right? And you haven't really given me enough information to say, look, your thinking is around about 80% correct. Here's a couple of the assumptions you've made in your response that you need to fix up to get it to 95 or 100%, right? If you show me this, I can't really work with it that much. But most people just feel, I've got to rush my work, I've got to do it, I've got to rush. If you do that, you're just not going to lay the foundations you need to get really good marks later on, okay? Again, my views on the thought experiment are just personal identity is transferred. These tables really are tables for you to write down and record all your thoughts that allow you then in turn to quickly respond to practice SAC answers and the actual SAC answers, questions, sorry. Now I'll show you what I mean by that. If I say outline the thought of the experiment and its implications, I'd expect you to write something like this. And I deliberately put these responses in there without proofreading them to show you that they are nothing but like a streams of consciousness kind of response. You just write down all the ideas that occur to you immediately and you use them as a tool for thinking. And when you're actually doing your practice SACs and your actual SAC, you'll be able to refer to it and say, oh yeah, well, you know, I wrote down these ideas. Maybe I should refine them a bit and put them in my response. So I said, what would I really want? I'd want something like this. Locke explores what would happen if the memories of a prince were transferred into the body of a cobbler who has forgotten his own memories. Also, the prince's consciousness is present in these memories. It presents itself to itself in these memories, and it is always aware of itself in these memories, which creates a psychological continuity. This, for me, when I'm answering this, really kind of points out what I think is extremely important in this experiment. That is a demonstration of how psychological continuity, which is the result of a chain of memories connected by a consciousness's awareness of itself in them, right, is what creates personal identity for Locke. These are my big thoughts. Psychological continuity can only exist if memory is in consciousness for Locke. This is just Locke's point of view. Because an awareness of personal identity requires awareness of itself in these memories. How else can you create the connection and thread, right? So, you know, logically, if I've gone to that work, I've gone to the trouble of writing that out, I've said, hey, sir, what do you think about this? I can say, you know, maybe it was wrong of you to write that particular word. What you really need to do is just fix it up by changing that word to something that's a bit more accurate, and then we can move on, okay? Similarly, here's my response to my views on the thought experiment. The idea seems plausible. I think it's actually got some merit, but there is no way of scientifically verifying it, because we just can't, you know, we can't actually transfer those memories yet. We don't know how to do that, okay? Also, I tend to disagree with the implications that memory and consequent psychological continuity, so I'm trying to point out again that memory and its connections generates psychological continuity, is the sufficient condition for the self, but it is necessary, because I believe personally that it creates a sense of self once you make those connections. It just happens. But it can't be the only condition, right? And because I've read Michaels, that's why. Because as Michaels points out, this is my little typo to point out that I just rushed this, but I'm trying to record all my thoughts. Points out there is something else that must exist in order for the first memory to be established. Memory presupposes personal identity. If personal identity is supposed to be in it, and it has to be to create a connection between memories. So what I'm basically saying is that even the first memory has to have itself in it in order to generate the connection between all the other memories, okay? That's what I believe. So there's got to be another point, another aspect to psychological continuity or personal identity, okay? the body might be a good place to start because, as Michaels implies, it works with the brain to generate experiences, and of course those experiences get recorded as memories, and of course those memories, according to Locke, would be stored within consciousness because there's a constant awareness of personal identity within them. Bang, and the rest unfolds. But now I know when I'm writing a exam response, I've already thought of these ideas, so I'm much more quick and I'm much more efficient with writing those responses, and the same goes for a SAC. Okay. This one's probably more important because it gets you to really think about the different aspects of personal identity and what each philosopher would think about them. I'm not going to model them to you because I think that I've done that enough by really pointing out the difference between what is barely passable and what is actually really good preparation work, okay? But I just need you to understand that detail, depth, thoughts, that's what's really necessary for this particular exercise, because it gets you to perform those evaluations and critical comparisons between different philosophers. It also gets you to think about the implications of philosophies. It also gets you to think about how do we deal with it in modern contexts when thinking about scientific advancements or developments. And that's really important, because if you can tick all those boxes off in an essay, you've got 80 to 90% on your essay. You know, it's really important that you know that. Cheers.